Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no co-host on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote-unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be? So I don't normally use my podcast platform to make generational appeals, but after going through the last 6 weeks thinking about warfare and war-making and leadership, I feel weirdly compelled to say this. We, and I mean the generation of which I am a part, are a generation riven by cynicism and skepticism. And I am not the first person by far to note this fact. We, and I mean the generation of which I am a part of, are so cynical and skeptical of power, people holding authority, love, people falling in love, and even hatred, and the power of negative emotions to move people to action, that we do not believe people when they say that emotions are driving them to actions. We almost always dismiss this. Why we became this way in our younger years and through our raising has been documented extensively. Broken homes, rearing ourselves and our siblings, cultural factors, economic disruptions, and on and on and on, and need not be elaborated upon here. But beyond the why of what made us, the fact is now my generation is the generation in leadership. Leadership in businesses, in cities, in towns, and even in families and communities. Leadership in places not on the internet, which we expanded and pioneered during our younger years. Leadership in the final frontier of the real world. We are, increasingly and much to our shock and dismay, being asked what we think and being queried about what to do when events in the real world and circumstances that are happening to real people in our families, in our communities, and even in our country, when those circumstances go, quote-unquote, off the rails. People are looking at us to figure out what to do. And, although I did not think this at the beginning of the year, I think now we are ready for the challenge. But we will, as usual, go only so far with providing advice to generations younger than us. Because the fact of the matter is, for all of my generation's adult lives, beginning around the age of 8 for many of us, we have had to figure it out, to go it alone, and to watch our own backs. Which, this lack of trust in systems, processes, and even relationships with people has made us strangely humble, but it has also scarred us, as veterans are scarred of endless foreign warfare in a world they did not make. The saw about my generation being a valley of humility trapped between two generational mountains of ego was never more true. My generation will lead, but without sentiment, without bouncing joy, and it will seem to those generations who follow us, and it already seems to them, that we have a sense of disconnected disinterest that will come off as dismissal to some, emotional hardness to others, and will be forgotten with merely a shrug when the moment of need for our leadership passes, as it quickly will, to the next generation. My generation is at the beginning of a 10-year window to be the dominant leadership generation in our families, in our communities, and in our cities. If we fail, don't worry, we won't flop around and we won't return. Just think of the Generation X CEO who was busted cheating on the kiss cam at the Coldplay concert earlier this summer, who briefly united all of American social media. And when our dominance is over, much like Cincinnatus in that old Greek legend, we will return to our plow and fade ignominiously back into history with nary even a whimper. No one will even know we were here. One thing, though, I would recommend to those listening who are of my generation, if they will listen, and some of you out there I know will quietly take note, as you always do, and keep your own counsel. As we descend into old age, let us attempt to recapture sincerity, put down our hard-won and long-carried cynicism, and attempt to demonstrate, as sincerely as we can, for those much, much younger than us who did not go through the things we went through and should not be hardened by cynicism and skepticism, the politics, and I use it in the small piece sense, the politics of hope. Not marketing hope, or hope tinged with a skeptical pose of very carefully curated emotional distance, but real, genuine, heartfelt hope. Gen X, those of us born between 1964 and 1979, recapturing and role modeling such hope in the future is the last real battle, the last real emotional frontier we have left to explore. So let's get after it. And well, that's it for me.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.